Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 12 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive analysis so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. These topics are relevant for prelims and mains, and accordingly, we will cover them in complete detail. So if you guys are benefiting from these sessions, do support us with your likes and comments, and don't forget to share these videos with other aspirants. Now, before we start the discussion, I have a very important announcement. Those who are preparing for 2026 and 2027, this is the perfect opportunity for you to enroll for our online classroom program. Unacademy is offering the lowest prices ever with a flat 60% off on our IAS courses. This subscription will give you access to all the live and recorded lectures from our top educators, along with the study material, the test series, and mentorship and doubt resolution sessions. So you can avail a 15-month subscription at just 22,999, and this offer ends very soon on the 9th of March. So all you have to do is click on the subscription link provided in the video description box below and enter the code IAS English. You need to enter the code IAS English to avail the discount. Then those of you who are preparing for the upcoming prelims, Unacademy is providing you a free opportunity to attempt full-length mock tests. On 9th of March, you get to attempt full-length GS and CSAT papers, so don't miss this opportunity. Again, the link is provided in the video description below. So before we start, please note that I'll be sharing the PDF of this session on my Telegram channel after the class ends. So please scan the QR code and ensure that you join my Telegram channel. With this, let's get started with today's detailed analysis, and let's begin with a topic which has been reported on page number 8 and as well as on the front page. Today, the Hindu carries an editorial focused on the disruptive policies of Donald Trump, how it could affect United States, the entire world, and what could be the implications for India. How should India handle the new world order that the Trump administration is trying to create? Over the last many days, we have been discussing some of the most controversial policies of Donald Trump, be it the policy to mass deport illegal migrants, be it the tariff wars that the Trump administration has started waging, or even the controversial approach of the Trump administration with regard to the Ukraine conflict and the Gaza war. So today, we will have a comprehensive discussion on this topic as to how Trump's policies is threatening America's interests, how this could disrupt the global world order, and what can India anticipate? How can India prepare for a changed world order, and how does India feel about Trump's controversial policies? So to understand this topic, I would like to break it down into different segments. First, let's talk about the problem of illegal migration in the United States and how the US has been dealing with it. As you all know, the US has been often known as the land of immigrants. But the large-scale illegal migration, which has been witnessed by United States, primarily from Mexico, from Central and South America, and from other parts of the world, has indeed caused a major burden for United States. It has led to social issues, increase in crime rate. It has led to a resistance from the American citizens against such immigration policies. Trump's presidential campaign was largely built on getting rid of illegal migrants through mass deportations. So as soon as Trump came to power for the second time, he has started fulfilling this commitment because no country can take the burden of illegal migrants beyond a certain point. Every country has a right to identify and deport such illegal migrants. But the point is, the process through which illegal migration and the deportation will be handled. The Trump administration used very questionable methods when it came to these mass deportations. The Trump administration started threatening countries like Mexico and Colombia with tariffs, essentially to blackmail them to accept the deportees. The Trump administration adopted highly questionable methods by mistreating the illegal migrants as well, by handcuffing them, by putting them in chains, by denying them access to basic amenities. Even food, water, and toilet facilities were denied to them, and they were mass deported. And this was essentially in contravention of international norms, and it was seen as a violation of human rights as well. Now, India, of course, has been affected by these policies of the Trump administration. India has been a big contributor of illegal migrants to the US. According to data, close to 7 lakh Indian illegal migrants might be present in the United States. So the Trump administration started deporting a few batches of Indian illegal migrants, and a few US military planes landed in Amritsar, bringing back these illegal migrants from India. Now, the usage of military transport planes to bring back illegal migrants and the practice of handcuffing them and using chains on them and denying them basic amenities is what raised concern. This is where experts have pointed out that India should have raised this issue, though India can't object to the deportation itself, because illegal migrants will be deported by any country. Just like India seeks to deport illegal migrants from Bangladesh or Myanmar, just like that, United States has a right to deport illegal migrants from India. So India did the right thing by accepting the illegal migrants, but we should have raised the concerns, the way in which illegal migrants were being treated, the way in which the Trump administration was arm twisting other countries, threatening them with tariffs. This is something India should have questioned. Not just India, most countries should have raised their voice about. Because this trend could have serious implications for human rights, for global migration. And India stands to be affected by this. Because many other countries also face a similar burden from India. From Australia to Europe, many countries deal with a huge burden of Indian illegal migrants. What if other countries learn the same lesson? What if they start mistreating Indian illegal migrants? So this is where I think India should stand up, raise this issue, and bring the global community around so that the basic rights of illegal migrants is protected while they are being deported. The other concern is the tariff wars that the Trump administration has started waging against the other countries. The Trump administration first threatened tariffs against Canada and Mexico, threatening them with 25% tariffs. And recently, just 2-3 days ago, Trump administration has started implementing these tariffs with some concessions for Mexico, but the tariffs have come into effect against both Canada and Mexico. Now, these tariffs represent a violation of the trade deals that US had entered into with Canada and Mexico. In 1994, these three North American countries had signed a free trade agreement, the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Area. This treaty was even revised and updated in 2018 when Donald Trump was the president for the first time. The US-Mexico-Canada agreement had been signed to revise the terms, as Trump has always felt that the other countries take advantage of the trade policies by levying high tariffs against American products while enjoying preferential access to the American market. And he has always sought to reduce the trade deficit by levying these high tariffs in order to boost domestic manufacturing in the US. Now, this is where I think Donald Trump needs a history lesson. That's what the editorial points out as well. It was America's policy to push manufacturing out of the country in the 80s and 90s. Because the cost of manufacturing, the cost of producing a good, a product in the US had become very expensive due to the higher cost of raw materials and the higher labor cost. So, back in the 80s and 90s, the US adopted the policy of globalization, pushed globalization on other countries which were not willing to accept it, and tried pushing manufacturing to other countries and jurisdictions where low-cost raw material and cheap labor was available. This is what enabled the rise of Asian economies such as China, later India, and many other Asian economies. The United States basically outsourced manufacturing to other low-cost jurisdictions where the capital requirement would be low. It pushed American companies, investors to invest in other countries to exploit the cheap labor available in countries like Vietnam as well, and exploit the cheaper raw materials and ensure that the price of the products is brought down for American consumers. But this policy of the US led to a decline in manufacturing in the US. The manufacturing base of the US got affected. And eventually, Americans started losing their jobs to factories and industries that started coming up in other countries. Now, US has every right to reverse that policy. US has every right to protect the livelihood interests of American citizens and rebuild its manufacturing base. But the manner in which the US seeks to do it is what is under question right now. Because Trump's policies of waging a trade war, Trump administration has proposed 20% tariffs on China and has started implementing it from the last 2 to 3 days. Initially, Trump had threatened China with 10% tariffs. Now, it has been doubled to 20% tariffs. And Trump administration has labeled many other countries, including India, as a tariff abuser. And the US has committed to impose tariffs on India and other countries starting from 2nd of April. India thought we might escape the tariff wars because when Prime Minister Modi visited United States recently, both the leaders agreed that India-US will work out a trade deal by the middle of this year. By mid-2025, India-US agreed that we will have a trade deal in place to address the tariff-related issues so that American products, American companies can also have greater access into the Indian market while protecting the preferential access that some Indian sectors have into the US market. But this trade deal will go out of the window if the Trump administration starts levying the tariffs on India from April 2nd. So that's why it's important to look at how the Trump administration is behaving with other countries. If the Trump administration could break down the legal commitments that were made under NAFTA and the US-Mexico-Canada agreement and levy tariffs on the neighboring countries, then that's a lesson for India as well. That despite a trade deal, let's say even a trade deal is worked out, that's no guarantee because the Trump administration is unpredictable. It has shown a penchant to revoke commitments and the treaties which are signed and even levy tariffs later on. I think this is where India should be a little more cautious because any high tariffs could affect our critical sectors like agriculture, the MSME industry, the software industry, etc. Even automobiles. They are heavily dependent on the American market. We have large volume exports headed towards the US market. And the Trump administration is also looking to target subsidies and state support given by developing nations like India. India offers a lot of subsidies. For example, we have the production-linked incentive scheme for several industries. We have the minimum support price for agriculture to support our farmers. But the Trump administration might take a shot. It might try to hit the subsidies and the support incentives offered by countries such as India. So this is where India needs to be a little more watchful and ensure that our core interests and our domestic economic interests are protected. Now, coming to the conflicts which are raging, be it Ukraine, be it Gaza, we have covered this enough, so I would not like to waste your time. The approach of Trump administration to essentially pin the blame on Ukraine for the war and exclude Ukraine from the peace process and even to get hold of Ukraine's mineral wealth is something that has raised eyebrows. And Trump's approach towards Gaza to give Israel a free hand to continue its disproportionate use of force while proposing a takeover of Gaza by evicting Palestinians from their homeland is highly controversial, questionable, and many countries, including American allies, have already condemned the policies of the Trump administration. In fact, the US is even breaking up with its NATO allies in Europe, and we have seen a fracture develop between the traditional European allies and the United States. Now, European countries led by UK, Germany, France, Italy, and others, they are looking to organize their own defense without being too dependent on NATO or America's security protection. Here, Trump administration does have a valid point that why should US foot the security bill of the European countries when they're not contributing adequately through their defense budget to the requirements of NATO. So in this context, European countries are basically being pushed by the US to increase their defense spending and try to look after their own security and their own defense, especially in the context that European powers are facing a threat from an aggressive Russia. France has called for creating a European nuclear deterrence. France has proposed that European countries should come together with France and UK, the two nuclear powers in Europe, to create a European level nuclear deterrence to deter Russia. And there is a proposal of even creating a Europe-based security force, a sort of a combined coalition security force to deal with the threats that emerge from an aggressive Russia. Now, how will this play out? How will this alter global geopolitics? And how will the growing closeness between US and Russia, where Trump administration is giving concessions to Russia and essentially enabling Russian interests, how will this alter global dynamics is something that we need to look out for. It's too early to say what exactly might happen, but definitely this is a big disruption, a massive disruption. Then also look at how Donald Trump has withdrawn the United States from important multilateral arrangements, be it the Paris Agreement of the Climate Change Convention. As a climate skeptic, Donald Trump has withdrawn the US from Paris Agreement, and he has given a call to continue America's dependency on fossil fuels. You might have heard of the slogan, drill baby drill, where Trump administration has aligned with oil companies and other fossil fuel focused companies, energy companies, to continue extracting hydrocarbons, burn fossil fuels at the cost of the environment. The US has withdrawn from WHO and the UN Human Rights Council, and Trump has threatened to withdraw from many other multilateral arrangements, and this could be a threat to multilateralism. And that is something India has always believed in. India has always believed that multilateral arrangements provide a voice for every country, even the small and weaker powers. So Trump's policies, which are disruptive, no doubt, is threatening the global order as we know. So India should adequately prepare for the consequences. But however, India's Foreign Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, has expressed a slightly different viewpoint. Just the other day, he was in United Kingdom. He was in London on an official visit, and he participated in a discussion at the legendary Chatham House. Chatham House is a very well-known think tank based out of London. Here I would like to deviate from the topic and tell you something very interesting about the Chatham House. This popular think tank brings together many top leaders, officials, experts, academicians together to debate and discuss about global geopolitics. Now, in the Chatham House, there is a code of conduct that all the participants have to adhere to. They have to follow these rules. It's popularly referred to as the Chatham House Rules. Now, what do you mean by this? Because there might be a possible prelims question based on such think tanks. Chatham House Rules basically dictate that the participants will not reveal the identity of the speaker if they have made any controversial statement. Because see, generally when you invite serving diplomats, ministers and leaders who are still in a position of power, or when you invite well-known individuals, they might hesitate to speak openly and freely on sensitive, controversial matters. Obviously, they'll be concerned about the backlash. They'll try to hold back, and that doesn't contribute to discussions and debates. So that is why Chatham House has a code. According to Chatham House rules, the participants can speak anything freely, irrespective of who they are, irrespective of what position they hold, because all the other participants will abide by the code that they will not speak about it outside of Chatham House. The participants will not go out and tell the media or post on social media that someone said like this, that this minister made such a controversial statement. They'll not reveal that. This essentially gives a sense of anonymity. And this code laid down by Chatham House, the Chatham House rules, has become quite popular amongst various other think tanks. When intellectuals come around, leaders and officials and well-known academicians and experts come together, it's important to freely debate and discuss every issue. So in many platforms, Chatham House rules are applied, where the participants have to swear by this code of conduct that they will not reveal what the participants spoke outside in the public. So that is something interesting you should know. Now, while participating at a dialogue in the Chatham House in London, Dr. Jaishankar has said that Trump's priorities and policies actually aligns with India's interests. Maybe not all the policies of Trump administration are bad for India. As I said, Trump is a businessman, a good negotiator, a transactional leader. And sometimes this might work in India's favor, in India's interests. Don't forget, India has always believed in the policy of multi-alignment. India is a multi-aligned country, especially in the last 3 decades. We have strongly believed in the approach of multi-alignment, where we align with any power which can fulfill our interests. We'll work with US, we'll work with Russia as well, if both of them can fulfill our interests. Similarly, we'll not hesitate even to work with China or even Pakistan, if necessary, if they can fulfill and protect our interests. So Trump's policies, according to Dr. Jaishankar, actually fulfills the approach of multi-alignment. It will allow India to work with both US and Russia without having to choose sides between them. Because see, since 1947, since Prime Minister Nehru laid down the foundation of our foreign policy, we have followed the principle of strategic autonomy. We follow independent foreign policy. So this eventually gave rise to the policy of multi-alignment. From being non-aligned in the Cold War, which was very essential to carve out a new ideology in a divided world, to developing a multi-aligned approach, India has come a long way. According to the global dynamics, we have gradually adopted our principle of strategic autonomy. During Cold War, when the world was divided between power blocks on ideological lines, we chose a third neutral path and championed a new ideology. In a way, we contributed to reduction of tensions during Cold War. This eventually transitioned into multi-alignment from non-alignment, especially post the end of the Cold War from 1990s onwards. India has been multi-aligned, working with different partners, irrespective of the differences they may have with each other. So Trump's approach could benefit our approach of multi-alignment, as it paves the way for India to work easily with Russia and at the same time remain close to the US. For example, Trump's priority with regard to connectivity projects such as IMEC corridor is something that would benefit India. In fact, the IMEC project was discussed when Prime Minister Modi met Donald Trump recently. Similarly, with regard to countering China, countering terrorism, India aligns with the priorities of the Trump administration. India might even stand to benefit in these areas. So don't think Trump's policies will be entirely bad for India. It might disrupt the world. It might be questionable on ethical, moral grounds, but eventually India can stand to benefit as well if we play our cards right. So Foreign Minister Jaishankar is absolutely right that Trump's priorities, some of it at least, aligns with India's interests, India's policy of multi-alignment. India can actually benefit from this. For example, let me give you one example. Until now, India was walking on a very thin rope, balancing US and Russia. On one hand, we never criticized Russia for the Ukraine war. We never followed the American sanctions, the Western sanctions on Russia. But we faced criticism from US and European countries for that. Now, that will not be the case anymore. Since US itself is working with Russia, US has admitted that it was at fault for triggering Russia into the Ukraine conflict. The path becomes easy for India to engage with Russia without facing the threat of American sanctions or criticism from the US. So that is a win-win situation for India. So that is something you need to keep in mind. India can stand to benefit as well in some areas. For example, countering China, India's military modernization. Then even with regard to trade, there are some areas where India-US can collaborate with critical emerging technologies, supply chains for critical strategic minerals. We can jointly collude and work together to counter China, which is good for India. We can prioritize projects like IMEC corridor. We can freely work with Russia without any concerns. So that is the advantage for India. And based on this, let's see if you guys can write an answer to this practice question. Please make a note of this question. UPSC might ask such questions where it requires your viewpoints, your analysis to be brought out in the answers. Now let's look at another important topic. On the same page, we have a column that is focused on women empowerment and women-related developmental issues. Because tomorrow, the 8th of March, the world will mark and celebrate International Women's Day. So to mark this occasion, The Hindu has brought out a special article written by the country representative for UN Women in India and the country representative for UNICEF in India. So clearly, both the writers are eminent personalities with considerable expertise in the issue or in the domain of women development and women empowerment. So basically, they know what they're talking about. That's why I feel this article is more important than some of the other columns in today's paper. The writers here are focused on the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and how India is on the right path to achieve the goals that were laid down under the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So that is what we need to understand from this article. What is Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action? This topic can be very important for prelims, even for mains. In fact, UPSC has already asked one basic prelims question on the Beijing Declaration. So there can be a mains question regarding how India has progressed towards achieving the goals and the mandate that has been laid down under the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So let's understand what exactly does the Beijing Declaration deal with? When was it adopted? What is its purpose? The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action was adopted in the year 1995 at the 4th World Conference on Women that was held under the leadership of United Nations. See, from 1960s itself, the UN had started prioritizing the issues related to women development and women empowerment. In 1975, the first UN conference on women was held in Mexico City. In 1980, the second conference took place in Copenhagen, and the third World Conference on Women was held at Nairobi in 1985. These three conferences paved the way for the world to understand the developmental problems, challenges faced by women around the world. Then eventually, in 1995, at the 4th UN Conference on Women, which was held in Beijing, China, the global countries, around 189 countries, they adopted the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which lays down the goals and targets with regard to women development and empowerment. So this UN platform that was created, it focuses on issues that affect women especially. It focuses on gender-related issues. It focuses on the inequality that exists in societies around the world on the lines of gender. It basically tried to break down the patriarchal structure of societies and to eliminate the orthodoxy present in societies through better reforms and governance, to empower women and to uplift women around the world. So it focused on issues such as poverty amongst women. It focused upon providing adequate education, securing the health and nutrition of women, especially to address maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rate. It focused on improving the livelihood opportunities for women, creating adequate jobs, making them financially independent. It focused on securing women, ensuring women's security, protecting women from violence, be it domestic violence faced within the household, within the family, or be it threats faced in patriarchal societies, where women, when they step outside the home, they end up facing a number of threats, where they end up being targeted, even molested, sexually, raped. So to secure justice to such women, to prevent such incidents of violence against women, and to uphold women's security, and essentially to protect the human rights, the basic rights guaranteed to women under the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, this platform was set up in Beijing. India was a signatory to it. India was a major participant. Government of India actively participated and contributed to the eventual adoption of Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. In fact, many non-government organizations also participated. Close to 200 women from India took part at the 4th World Conference on Women, along with government officials from the Indian government, and we played a pivotal role in the adoption of this declaration. It is these goals and mandates which have later entered the Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the MDG and SDG targets laid down through the United Nations. Those targets related to women development and empowerment are inspired from the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Now let's evaluate quickly, where does India stand when it comes to the progress on all these fronts which were identified through the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. What has India done? Has India really made progress with regard to women development and empowerment? Have we reduced the gender-based inequalities? So let me know what you think as well in the comments. Do you think India has really brought down and reduced gender-based inequalities? So let me know what you think. What's your view on this in the comment section? Now let me give you some examples regarding how India has performed. Now if you look at healthcare, for example, recently we actually had a discussion just a couple of days ago on how India has successfully brought down maternal mortality and infant mortality rate significantly. In fact, the rate of decline of MMR and IMR in India over the last 30 years has been much faster than the global average. Today, maternal mortality rate in India has dropped below 100. And if you look at the rate of decline from 1990 to 2020, India has done phenomenally well. Same with infant mortality rate. India has done very well in bringing down the IMR rate. That clearly points towards improved institutional delivery, improved healthcare services for pregnant women and infants. And this is a credit for our healthcare programs. So you can mention healthcare schemes such as Janani Suraksha Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana, and the various schemes, including Ayushman Bharat, how they have a priority, how they have focused on women-related health issues, how they have provided access to better healthcare, institutional deliveries, how it tries to ensure better nutrition for pregnant women and infant kids, how it tries to compensate for livelihood loss by providing conditional cash transfers, which incentivizes pregnant women to access institutional healthcare facilities. So that itself is a remarkable achievement of India. Then if you look at education, here you can talk about initiatives such as Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, or how special priority is given for the girl child under the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, the midday meal programs, to ensure that the girl child has a right access to education, and there is special priority given under the schemes to ensure that we increase the inclusion of the girl child in schools. Ever since right to education became a fundamental right, India has done very well with regard to stepping up enrollment and retaining the girl child in the school, and our female literacy levels have been rising. So you need to refer to such schemes and point out the success of India. Of course, everything is not perfect, right? Of course, we haven't solved the gender-related problems and the inequalities that still exist in our society. But you need to acknowledge the areas where India has done actually very well. Then look at the financial independence of women in the country. Look at the livelihood opportunities that have been created. You can take examples of schemes like Manrega. Manrega has indeed played a big role, especially in the rural parts of India, where it is implemented to provide livelihood opportunities for women. Under the National Rural Livelihood Mission, the Deen Dayal Yojana, there is special priority for women-led self-help groups. Then if you look at institutions like NABARD, the rural cooperatives which are present, the government has pushed these institutions to provide preferential credit, preferential loans at concessional rates for women-led self-help groups and entrepreneurial initiatives to create more livelihood opportunities for women. So like this, you can go on to list many initiatives that India has taken up. and you can point out how the status of women in general has improved in the last 3 decades following the adoption of Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. You can talk about the benefits of a digital economy, how something like UPI has transformed the financial independence of women in the household, how government benefits are being directly delivered to the bank account of the beneficiaries through direct benefit transfer, how the jam trinity of linking the Jan bank account with Aadhaar numbers and the mobile phone numbers has enabled the government to directly deliver the cash benefits of government schemes to targeted beneficiaries, particularly women, to ensure that there is more money available in the hands of women in a household. This increases their decision-making power. You can talk about the women reservation that we have provided in the political space. You can talk about the 50% reservation at Panchayati Raj institutions, the recent women reservation bill that was enacted in the parliament to provide for reservation in parliament and in legislative assemblies. How this could be a transformative tool for political empowerment. But at the same time, you should be aware of the shortcomings as well. For example, we can do a lot more when it comes to women's security, safety and security. The number of rapes, the number of molestations that are reported is alarmingly high in the country. The skewed sex ratio, especially the skewed child sex ratio, the continuing menace of female feticide and infanticide, which remains a social evil in our country, the lack of opportunities for women in the informal sector and as well as in the formal sector, even in the corporate world, how it is so challenging and difficult for women to move up the corporate ladder. In fact, in today's newspaper itself, there is another column that focuses on this issue. How women in the corporate world face many hurdles and barriers to grow up in their careers. So you can present all these points as the drawbacks, as the shortcomings of India, where India still has a lot to do. From safety and security to dealing with social evils, such as even child marriage, right? You can mention some examples and incidents recently which have been reported in the news. You can talk about the concerning child sex ratio in states like Haryana, the continuing prevalence of female infanticide in some places, and how women don't get equal and adequate opportunities. So that will make it a balanced argument, because see, depending on the question, you will have to try and change your answer, alter your argument slightly. There could be a essay topic on this as well, regarding India's performance with regard to achieving the goals and mandate of the Beijing Declaration. So please take up this practice question, try to write an answer for this question. Let's see how many of you can write a good answer. You can post your answers in the comment section below. Now coming to the next article. On page number 10, The Hindu brings out a detailed article on the ties between India and Nepal in the domain of education. Now, why is this topic in news and why should we study this article? Why should we go beyond the article and understand India-Nepal relations with focus on ties in the education domain? That's because recently there was a disturbing development at the Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology in Odisha, in Bhubaneswar, where a Nepali student committed suicide after allegedly facing harassment, physical and emotional harassment from another student. Now, despite this Nepali student, a girl student, complaining to the authorities in the college regarding the harassment she was facing, allegedly no action was taken, and this eventually led to her suicide. So this triggered hundreds of Nepali students studying in that college. They all protested, and the manner in which the college authorities and administration reacted and almost retaliated against Nepali students and how they mistreated the foreign students is indeed a matter of concern, a matter of shame for a country like India. Allegedly, the teachers and the staff and the administration, they abused the Nepali students. They kicked them out of the college. They even evicted them from the campus and the hostels, and overnight dropped them at railway stations and bus stations. Racial slurs were hurled against them based on their nationality. They were abused and humiliated as well, and this has been recorded on camera. Now, these developments are very disturbing as it could threaten India-Nepal relations, because eventually Nepal's government stepped in. Nepal's Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli took up the issue and raised it diplomatically with India. Now, that is the last thing we want with a friendly and important neighbor such as Nepal. Don't forget, Nepal is a Himalayan state sandwiched between India and China, very critical for our strategic interests and security interests. And we can't afford to antagonize a country like Nepal, that too when leaders like KP Sharma Oli, when they are in power. Because KP Oli has been known to be a pro-China, anti-India leader. Whenever he has come to power, he has deliberately adopted anti-India policies, aggravated the boundary disputes at Kalapani and Susta, and triggered unnecessary diplomatic issues while bringing Nepal closer to China, which threatens India's strategic and security interests. So someone like KP Oli and other anti-India leaders and politicians in Nepal could exploit these issues, and they could basically point out that Nepalis are not safe in India. Now, that is something we can't afford, because this is a very special relationship which goes beyond these issues and these sentiments that exist on both the sides. Nepalis have long complained of such discrimination on racial and national lines, on the lines of their nationality and race. They often face alleged discrimination and abuse as well, and they often complain about this when they come to India. Now, this is where we need to understand why it is important to protect this relationship. See, India-Nepal relationship is rooted in the 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship. This landmark treaty is the foundation of our relationship. Through this, then Prime Minister Nehru set up Nepal as a strategic buffer to shield India from any possible threat from across the Himalayas, primarily from the rising aggressive state of China. So, given our historical civilizational links and close cultural ties, India-Nepal decided to keep their borders open through this treaty to facilitate the free movement of people, goods, and vehicles. Given our civilizational links formed through Hinduism and Buddhism, given Nepal's dependency on India because it's a landlocked country, it would depend on India for all essential supplies to access the seaports as well. So India-Nepal decided to keep the borders open and allow for free movement. That's why Indians can enter Nepal without a visa, and Nepalis can also come to India without a visa. That is a special arrangement that we have. In fact, India has open borders only with Nepal, with no other country. With Bhutan, we have a partially open border. But with Nepal, it's a completely open border with no border controls, no hard border controls. Then apart from this, the treaty also says that both countries will accord national treatment to the citizens of each other. The treaty says that there is a specific provision which mandates India-Nepal to accord national treatment to the citizens of the other country. Which means if Indians go to Nepal, you will be almost treated as you are a Nepali citizen. You will enjoy almost the same rights and privileges, except for standing in elections, voting in elections, and holding some key offices. Apart from that, you will almost have the same rights and privileges as a Nepali citizen. Similarly, Nepalis should get national treatment in India. Apart from few privileges, most of the other rights and privileges would be made available for Nepali citizens. That is the reason why Nepalis are eligible for many government exams, including UPSC exams. Nepalis can reside in the country. There is a specific provision related to this, where Nepalis can even settle in India, buy property in India. They have the right of movement across the country. Apart from few restricted areas, Nepalis have a right to move across the country, settle and reside and buy property. These rights are guaranteed as part of the national treatment that both sides are supposed to provide to each other. So if you look at the treatment of Nepali students at the KIIT campus, clearly it was a violation of the treaty. So what happened in Bhubaneswar? It threatens the very foundation of India-Nepal Treaty of Peace and Friendship. And also please understand, this is not just about India-Nepal. Today, India is emerging as an attractive destination for students from around the world. Do you know how many foreign students are studying in our country? If I tell you the number, some of you might be shocked. There are 46,800 plus students studying in India from 170 plus countries. India may not be the most preferred destination for education, especially higher education, but you still have students from many countries, especially the global south. especially developing, underdeveloped countries, from Sri Lanka to Maldives to African countries to the Pacific Island states to Iran to Central Asian countries to even some Western countries. Many foreign students opt for studying in India at various levels, from undergraduate courses all the way up to PhD. For example, there are a number of Nepali research scholars in India pursuing their PhD in the country. So what kind of message will you send out to foreign students who are coming to India hoping for equal opportunities and a good education? Because see, don't forget, foreign students bring revenue for the country. They bring foreign exchange. And don't forget, they form a close cultural link, establishing close people-to-people relations between our two countries. So if you scare away foreign students through such developments, it could have a huge impact on our soft power, on the very image of India as a tolerant and vibrant society. So that is why the writer is sending out a note of warning that the government should intervene and ensure that foreign students feel safe, feel protected, and they should not face any kind of discrimination, especially on the lines of their race, their ethnicity, their nationality. That too when it happens from teachers and staff members, right? Because for a teacher, the identity of a person should never matter. Just like for doctors, lawyers, the identity, the background of a person shouldn't matter. Similarly, for teachers especially, the background of a student is immaterial. Whether they come from a poor or rich background, whether they come from a third world country or a developed country, whether they come from a major religion or a minor religion, these facts are immaterial. So when such incidents happen, it's important for the state to intervene, step in and protect not just the country's image, but genuinely seek to protect the interests of foreign students in the larger interest of our foreign relations with friendly countries. So this is what we need to learn from this article. Now let me know what you think about this. What is your stand on the controversy that erupted at the KIIT campus? Who was at fault? Let me know in the comments. Next, we have a small article on page number 4 related to autonomous councils in Assam. The Assam Legislative Assembly has adopted a bill to make some changes for 7 autonomous councils which have been set up in tribal areas in the mountainous forested tribal belt of Assam. See, Assam has a diverse multi-ethnic society. It is home to a number of ethnic tribes, indigenous communities. And in some of the tribal areas, constitutional autonomy has been guaranteed. Those who have studied polity or internal security would be aware of this. Under the 6th schedule of the Constitution, a few tribal belts in Assam have been accorded with constitutional status. Constitutional autonomy has been provided where many subjects have been delegated to the local autonomous councils. Now, can you find out how many such autonomous councils are there in Assam which have constitutional status under 6th schedule? This is a small homework I'm giving for you. This is an assignment. Take it up seriously. Find out which are these autonomous councils in Assam which have constitutional status under the 6th schedule. Please mention that in the comments. Now, this article here is not referring to these constitutional autonomous councils. It is referring to the other autonomous councils in Assam created by the state legislature. They have no constitutional status, but they are created through state laws in order to ensure tribal welfare in some of the remote areas, in some of the disadvantaged areas, and also to provide for more decentralization so that local indigenous communities can look after their own development, and to curb any sentiments with regard to separatism and insurgency, because that has been a feature across Northeast India. Local autonomy has been provided at the state level as well. Statutory autonomy has been granted where few autonomous councils have been set up. Is that clear? So there is a change which has been done by the state government, by the state assembly, by passing this bill. Now these autonomous councils are supposed to have regular periodic elections. That is a feature of providing autonomy. Ensure that there is a local governing body. There are regular periodic elections which are held so that members of the local tribe can contest and essentially get elected to these autonomous councils, and they can look after their own administration, manage the resources, manage the land, and protect the culture, the language of the local tribe. So periodic elections are supposed to be held, and these councils have a regular term of 5 years. Just like the parliament and the state assemblies, these autonomous councils, both the constitutional councils under 6th schedule and even the local autonomous councils, have a term of 5 years. But in case, let's say, elections can't be held due to some reasons, let's say there is a disaster or there has been some violence. So due to such constraints, if let's say elections can't be held, the term of the autonomous council can be extended by 1 year. 1 year extension can be provided. So this provision is already present in the state laws. But what happens if elections can't be held even after 6 years? This was a question which had not been addressed. So that's why Assam Legislative Assembly has passed this bill where the governor of the state will take over these autonomous councils if elections have not been held even after extending the term of the council for 1 year. Understood? That is what has been reported in this article. This applies only to the local autonomous councils with statutory status created by the Assam government. It does not apply for constitutional councils which have constitutional status under the 6th schedule because they are covered under 6th schedule provisions. So let's see which are these autonomous councils. You can see the list over here. The Mysing Autonomous Council, Bodo Kachari Welfare Autonomous Council, which was recently set up. The Tengal Kachari Autonomous Council, Diori Autonomous Council, Sonawal Kachari Autonomous Council, Raba Hasong Autonomous Council, and the Thiwa Autonomous Council. So please make a note of this and identify which are the other autonomous councils in Assam which have constitutional status under the 6th schedule. Now let's move on to the prelims section. Today we have a number of small articles which we would like to cover in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Let's start with this article which has been reported on the front page and as well as on page number 14. This article is referring to AI Kosha, which has been launched by the government of India. So what is AI Kosha? The AI Kosha is essentially a repository of data sets which can be used to train large language models which are being indigenously developed in our country. See, today, generative AI and large language models have taken over the world with the launch of ChatGPT in the US by OpenAI and the launch of DeepSeek by a Chinese startup. Clearly, US and China have taken a leap over other countries when it comes to advances in AI technology. India is trying to catch up with them, and India has an ambitious mission called India AI Mission. The government has allocated more than 10,000 crores for this initiative, and there is state backing to pioneer AI developments in the country. So when it comes to AI technology, one big challenge is procuring the expensive GPUs, the graphic processing units, which are essential to train the algorithms and crunch the massive amounts of data. So GPUs produced by American chip manufacturers such as NVIDIA, they're very, very expensive. So small startups, colleges, research institutions can't afford them. So under India AI Mission, the government is setting up the infrastructure. A pooled GPU infrastructure is being created, and the government has already procured 14,000 GPUs. The goal was 10,000 GPUs initially, but we have already procured 14,000 GPUs and more will be added every quarter to create a pooled resource which can be made accessible at a very cheap cost for private companies, AI startups in the country, for colleges and research and development centers. Instead of each company, each institution spending on GPUs and the basic infrastructure, the government is creating a pooled infrastructure, and the government will rent it out for a very cheap cost so that the required AI infrastructure is put in place. So apart from setting up the GPU infrastructure, what the researchers need is the training data sets. Because these algorithms, these large language models, are essentially trained on massive quantities of data. That's how they learn and eventually start generating their own intuitive content. So this requires the creation of such repositories of data sets. And that is what AI Kosha is all about. The government under India AI mission has established a repository of such large data sets. Because don't forget, many government agencies, ministries, they are sitting on piles and piles of data. Take for example, ISRO. ISRO has satellite imagery and satellite generated data, which can be very crucial for planning, for disaster management, etc. So ISRO will make all the public data available on this platform AI Kosha. So our indigenous large language model can be trained by using ISRO's training data. Then similarly, Home Ministry, Finance Ministry, various government departments, they're all holding on to large volumes of public data, or what we can call as non-personal data. So if this data is made part of this repository, AI Kosha, it will enable our companies and startups and researchers to make use of the large, readily available data sets to create the most appropriate and efficient AI tools and large language models which can suit the Indian context. It can deliver responses in local languages. In a country like India, that is a priority. You need AI tools, generative AI tools, which can deliver content in local languages. So translation is a big requirement. And delivering appropriate content which is suited for that region, for that particular user, is very important. So it is very important to ensure that researchers have access to adequate non-personal data, which is basically public data. So when we say non-personal data, it refers to data through which you can't identify the person behind it. It's not directly linked with any individual. When it comes to data, there are two types: personal data, non-personal data. Personal data is such data through which you can identify the living individual behind it. Basically, the biometric details and the personal details of a person through which you can identify the individual. That's why we have a data protection law today. Recently, India has enacted a law, the Digital Data Protection Act, which is in place to protect personal data. Whereas non-personal data is very useful if it is monetized. In fact, the government set up two committees a few years ago to provide recommendations on regulating personal and non-personal data. To regulate personal data, the B.N. Sri Krishna Committee was set up. And based on Sri Krishna Committee's recommendations, the Data Protection Bill was drafted. Similarly, for non-personal data, another committee had been set up under Chris Gopalakrishnan, one of the co-founders of Infosys. Chris Gopalakrishnan Committee had recommended that the government should mandate private companies to share non-personal data in the public domain, so it is available for public research and we can monetize it. For example, cab hailing apps like Ola, Uber, or food delivery apps like Swiggy, Zomato, etc. They will be holding large volumes of non-personal data which can be very useful if it is monetized in the right way. It can help in understanding customer behavior. It can help the companies in designing better products for the customer, improving efficiency, and thus delivering economic benefits. So Chris Gopalakrishnan Committee had recommended that the government should mandate private companies to share non-public data or non-personal data in the public domain and make it available for research. But companies had pushed back against this. So now, since the government is setting up an AI repository and creating such data sets, it's important to push the companies, the private organizations as well, to contribute their non-personal data into AI Kosha, because it will help in training our AI algorithms. Back then, companies were pushing back against this recommendation because there was no buzz about large language models. But today, everyone understands how important it is to access more data sets to better train our AI algorithms. So the time is right to push private companies and the private organizations as well to contribute data sets into AI Kosha so that we can better train our AI algorithms. Next, On page 4, there is a reference to Bangas Valley in Jammu and Kashmir, located near the line of control. The Bangas Valley is this beautiful location in the Himalayas, located 100 kilometers away from Srinagar, very close to the temporary de facto border between India and Pakistan along the line of control. There are two bowl-shaped valleys present here, which can be a perfect tourist destination for skiing and other adventure activities, including hot air balloons. So the J&K administration is looking to exploit the tourist potential by focusing on ecotourism in the Bangas Valley near line of control. Previously, this region was affected by the infiltration of militants from across the border. Pakistan was using this route to push terrorists across the LOC into India. But today, with the decline of militancy and more stability being seen in J&K, the time is right to exploit the tourist opportunities present. Because in Jammu and Kashmir, particularly in the Kashmir Valley, traditionally there have been some places which are very, very popular amongst tourists. Places like Gulmarg, Pahalgam and Sonamarg, they have been overexploited with tourism. So if other areas are exploited as well with ecotourism, without harming the environment, without overexploiting tourism, and if sustainable ecotourism is promoted, this could be very beneficial for the economy of J&K. So please mark the location, Bangas Valley near LOC. Next, there is a detailed article today regarding the chadars or the popular blankets that are produced in Solapur in Maharashtra. So let's understand what is so important about the Solapur chadar and what is this article talking about. The Solapur chadar refers to this cotton blanket which is usually hand woven. At one point, families in Solapur, they would hand knit these blankets. They would use hand looms and they would custom make each and every blanket, which is known for its superior fine quality. And it was one of the first products from Solapur to be given the GI tag, the geographical indication status. Eventually, the handloom business was taken over by industrialization. Machines such as the jacquard looms were introduced, and Solapur widely adopted these powered looms as well. And eventually, Solapur actually became known as a textile capital in our country. It became one of the largest cities in Asia with spinning mills. See, this native handloom industry has been groomed from many centuries. The credit goes to the Marathas, the Peshwas, the Peshwa rulers, who encouraged families in Solapur to tap the local artisanal skills. Traditionally, the very skill of making the chadar and other textiles, it was largely a family-run business where the family would pass down the skills generation to generation. But as industrialization took over and powered looms replaced hand looms, it was widely distributed across Solapur. But today the industry is facing a big threat due to competition, due to the declining support from the government and the challenges faced by the local artisans. They're not able to sustain this industry and it's almost heading towards it's basically on the brink of collapse. There are serious economic challenges facing the loom industry in Solapur. So that's why the topic is relevant for prelims. You should know the Solapur chadar and its relevance and the GI tag which it has been accorded with. On page 12, there's an article referring to Navika Sagar Parikrama 2, which is a very courageous, ambitious naval expedition by two women sailors from Indian Navy. I think it's apt to pay tribute to these women sailors on the eve of Women's Day. Lieutenant Commander Dilna and Rupa, they have been showing exemplary courage in this global circumnavigation trip using a sailing boat, INSV Tarini. They've already docked at many key locations, and there are a couple of locations that are referred to in this newspaper which can be important for our exams, especially for map-based questions. These sailors, women sailors of the Indian Navy, they have recently passed through the Drake Passage, the deadly, notorious Drake Passage. Where is it located? It's located between South America and Antarctica. Now, this would be Argentina over here, and this would be Antarctica, the South Pole. Between Argentina and Antarctica, there is this notorious passage which links the Pacific with the Atlantic. It is considered to be one of the most turbulent waters in the world. Navigating the Drake Passage is an absolute nightmare, a terror for anyone, even for experienced sailors. Navigating to the Drake Passage is an absolute terror and nightmare. So, the women sailors of Indian Navy have successfully navigated the Drake Passage and they reached the strategic port of Stanley, located at the Falkland Islands, which is disputed between Argentina and United Kingdom. It goes back to the colonial era when UK controlled the Falkland Islands, now which is claimed by Argentina. In fact, UK and Argentina have even fought a war over the Falkland Island dispute. So, in strategic waters over here, Port Stanley is located. So, the Indian sailors have docked and they have departed from here towards the Cape of Good Hope. So, please mark these locations. It's very important. And also, can you see Ushuaia in Argentina over here? This is one of the last major cities present in the southern hemisphere. And this is the departing point for expeditions towards Antarctica. Not just scientific expeditions, but even for commercial tourist expeditions. Today, Antarctic tourism has become widely popular. So most of the expeditions, they depart from here, from Ushuaia in southern Argentina. They pass the Drake Passage and then reach the Antarctica. So please be aware of these locations. Next, another article where locations are in the news. This is related to India-Sri Lanka ties. Prime Minister Modi might visit Sri Lanka in April to discuss the key issues in the relationship. And during the visit, it is reported that PM Modi might inaugurate a solar power plant built by Indian assistants at Sampur, at a place known as Sampur. A solar power project has been completed by India as part of India-Sri Lanka collaboration. So let me show you where Sampur is located, why this project is important. Sampur is located in eastern Sri Lanka, near Trincomalee. Trincomalee is a strategic port which is historically linked with India. In fact, at the Trincomalee port, there are World War era oil tank farms built by the British, which later has been renovated by India. Now, India wants to build new oil tank farms as well at Trincomalee port and invest in the strategic Trincomalee port to step up our influence in the Indian Ocean. So near Trincomalee, you have this town called Sampur, where India's NTPC, the National Thermal Power Corporation, in a joint venture with a Sri Lankan power entity, has built a solar power plant. Now, this was a long-standing wish of India. We fought for this project over many years because hostile governments and leaders in Sri Lanka, they used to take away this project and they would try to award the project to China. So after many years of tussle and protecting our influence and interests, India has now managed to complete this solar plant, and PM Modi might be inaugurating this in April when he visits Sri Lanka. Next, on page 14, there is another important article related to science and tech and research and development. The government of India is creating a corpus of 1 lakh crore rupees to facilitate research and development in the country. Now, if you guys remember, in last year's interim budget, which was presented in February 2024, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had announced a 20,000 crore fund for Department of Science and Technology. Then the government has even passed a law in the parliament to establish the ANRF on the lines of the National Research Foundation in the US, which funds scientific research and development. On similar lines, India has set up ANRF with statutory backing, the Anusandhan National Research Foundation. It aims to set up a fund of 50,000 crores with 36,000 crores coming from non-government sources, that is private sources. See, when it comes to research and development in our country, the overall investment that we make, be it the government-led investment or private sector investment, if you take that cumulatively, the total R&D investment of India as a percentage share of GDP is less than 1% of our GDP. The total money that we are investing in our country in R&D, including government investment and private investment, is less than 1% of our GDP. It's around 0.65%. Now, this is quite shocking. It's quite alarming as well. It's very low, because if you look at scientifically advanced countries, you take Western countries, for example, or China or other industrialized nations, scientifically advanced nations, they spend anywhere between 1.5 to 3% of their GDP. We are basically not even spending half of what other advanced countries are spending on science and research. This is the gap we have to fill. And also, if you look at the R&D spending in India, majority of the expenditure is incurred by the government. Private sector contribution is very, very less. Out of the total investments in R&D in our country, hardly around 30 to 36% is coming from the private sector, which means private industries, companies are not investing enough in research and development. Majority of the investment in R&D is coming from the government and government institutions. Now, if you look at developed countries, industrialized nations, scientifically advanced countries, do you know what is the percentage of private sector funding? It can be more than double of this. In countries like US and China, the percentage of private sector contribution is in the range of 75 to 77%. Whereas in India, our private sector contributes hardly 30 to 36%. So increasing private sector investment is critical. That is why the government is setting up a 1 lakh crore fund, which will basically provide concessional loans with low interest and a flexible repayment period. This fund will be used by ANRF with Department of Science and Technology to finance R&D projects in the country through the form of concessional loans, which will be paid back by the researching institution. Low interest flexible loans will be given. So you can think of this as a sort of a PLI scheme. Not exactly a PLI scheme, but something like a PLI scheme. It incentivizes the private sector to invest in research and development by offering concessional loans. Clear? Now coming to the next article. On page 16, there's an article referring to a global NGO known as Save the Children. Save the Children is a global charity, an international non-governmental organization which is in the news. See, UPSC has a habit of asking questions on prelims questions, especially on global NGOs. We have got questions on Amnesty International, Doctors Without Borders. So there can be a question on Save the Children. It's in news because of developments in Syria. Ever since the Assad regime was brought down, there are many unexploded ordnances and explosives lying around in the country because Syria has been devastated by a civil war since 2011. So government forces, rebels, terror groups, they've all laid many mines and they've left behind many ordnances and explosives which have not exploded. This is a threat for civilians and especially for children. And according to data provided by this international NGO, many children in Syria have been injured. Many have been killed. Up to 188 children have been affected and more than 60 children have been killed in Syria because of these unexploded ordnances which went off. So clearing these mines and unexploded ordnances is a priority on humanitarian grounds. That is the focus of the article. So this international NGO was established in 1919 in United Kingdom at the end of the First World War. Because World War I left behind a devastating impact on children in Europe, where children were orphaned in large numbers. Children were subjugated to large-scale human rights violations in the conflict, where lakhs of children in Europe were killed and injured. So to protect them and ensure their safety, their overall well-being, this international NGO was founded in 1919 in the UK. And today it works in conflict zones around the world. It has general consultative status with the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, which is one of the primary organs of the UN. All right. Now coming to the last article for today, again from international relations, Sudan has filed a complaint. The civil war affected country has filed a case of genocide against United Arab Emirates at the International Court of Justice. This is related to the civil war that's going on in Sudan since 2023, where UAE allegedly is involved in sponsoring one of the parties in the civil war. Sudan's civil war is basically a conflict between Sudanese armed forces and a paramilitary group known as RSF, Rapid Security Forces. See, Sudanese armed forces, after they carried out a coup, they toppled the Sudanese dictator and they captured power in the country. The Sudanese armed forces allegedly are close to Islamist elements and groups which are involved in promoting jihadist ideology and terrorism. And this was creating a space for Al-Qaeda, ISIS-linked terror organizations in Sudan, which is crucial for United Arab Emirates. Because Sudan has large gold deposits in the Darfur region, in North, South and West Darfur especially, there are large gold deposits, which is crucial for the economy, the gold-dependent economy of UAE. So to counter the rise of radical jihadist terror groups and to maintain its control over the gold mines and deposits, it has been alleged that UAE has secretly sponsored the Rapid Support Forces, a paramilitary group, to launch this civil war against Sudanese armed forces, which has triggered the conflict in this country. Is that clear? So now the Sudanese armed forces, which is considered to be the legitimate authority, has filed a case of genocide against the UAE for allegedly sponsoring the killings by RSF, where a local community called the Masalit community have been targeted brutally by the RSF forces. It's alleged that UAE is funding and supplying weapons and training to the RSF to basically control the gold deposits and mines, and as well as to counter the rise of Islamist jihadist terror outfits. And in this process, the RSF has ended up committing large-scale atrocities against a native community called the Maslit community near Khartoum and in the Darfur region of Sudan. That's why Sudan has taken this matter to the International Court of Justice and filed a case of genocide against the UAE. So on this note, I bring my discussion to an end. If you guys have liked the session, do press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.